Story 1. Polyamory seems really exhausting trying to maintain more than one relationship. I can't imagine having a job and your own life and getting two or more relationships to work. Story 2-1. I think as long as everyone is a consenting, informed adult, it doesn't matter. I think a lot of people don't have the emotional maturity to successfully navigate one intimate partner, let alone more. Story 3. Consensual polyamory? Totally fine if it works for the people involved. Non-ethical anything? Big nope. Relationships only work with trust and communication, no matter the structure. Story 4. My opinion is that people should do what they want, and unless they're asking me to participate, it shouldn't really matter what I think. It's when someone decides that their way of living should affect me that they can get the fuck out. It doesn't matter if it's my physically intimate interactions or if they're promoting their religion. Mind your own damn business. Story 5. I think everyone is free to do what they prefer to. Probably at the beginning, it's also fun and cool, but over time, if you are into something long-term, it's unsustainable if you want to have children. Story 6. As long as there's no coercion involved and everyone is happy with it, then that's their business and no one else's. However, I think it's still worth applying a critical lens to, say, cultures and religions where men routinely marry multiple women but the reverse doesn't apply. Story 7. I am as monogamous as it gets, so it's a no for me personally, but who cares what other people do? If it works, it works. Admittedly, I used to feel a little negative towards the concept because I simply couldn't comprehend it. Then I realized that it's not for me to comprehend. Each to their own. Story 8. I don't really care about it one way or the other. However, I did have an exhausting conversation with someone here a couple of weeks ago, on a thread where a person's wife was cheating on them. This person was trying to convince me that monogamy is wrong and limiting, and that people need to be educated because polygamy and polyamory are the natural ways that everyone should follow. Story 9. I do not judge people if that is their preference, but personally, it is not for me. I dipped my toes in, and I figured out I am just not cut out for that kind of thing. It is exhausting trying to be mentally and emotionally connected and in sync with more than one person. It ends up feeling like I am half-assing two relationships instead of whole-assing one. And I realized that when I was giving attention to the other person, all it did was make me feel estranged from my primary partner. I realized I much prefer being in a monogamous relationship. Story 10. Wife and I have done swinging in the past. Neither of us could even imagine trying to have entire relationships outside of ours. We've met swingers happily married for over 10 years. I am not personally aware of any successful polyamorous relationships. I'm certain they are out there, but most I've seen or observed are disasters. Story 11. There are lots of flavors of ethical non-monogamy. There is really only one flavor of non-ethical monogamy, and I'm pretty sure that qualifies as kidnapping and assault. Ethical non-monogamy encompasses everything from swinging, which usually means a mostly monogamous couple engages in sex outside the marriage but not emotions, to polyamory, literally meaning many loves or many emotional and physical relationships, hotwifing, etc. It is a large category, and it is a spectrum. Swingers might just enjoy sex as a fun pastime, or they may have fantasies that can't be fulfilled with only two people. You can be in the lifestyle and only play a few times a year or even take years-long breaks. Polyamory is almost a sexuality. It is the ability to emotionally bond with several people without lessening the bonds with others. The big thing about ethical non-monogamy is that there are rules put in place. Both parties have to agree to these rules, and within the bounds of these rules, no one has done something wrong. If you think about it, monogamous relationships are the same way, but those rules are more societally driven. In ethical non-monogamy, you have to intentionally create rules which you can live with. If for any reason you figure out that actually you can't live with that, then you have to communicate it quickly and honestly. I would argue that it isn't that most people don't have the kind of trust and communication in their relationships to do this, but most of the people who are interested in non-traditional relationships don't have the trust and respect and communication skills to do ethical non-monogamy. And even if you do have the kind of foundation, you don't really know if your skills are up to it until you try it, and the risks are pretty high for a lot of people. Ethical non-monogamy doesn't add problems to a relationship. It just takes whatever problems are there and amplifies them. If you have a selfish spouse, then that trait will become much more apparent in ethical non-monogamy. Ethical non-monogamy can take a relationship that could last for a decade and end it in a month. This has turned into a textbook. Ethical non-monogamy is as valid a form of lifestyle as any other. It might take more work, and kids, as in if you have children, will complicate the ethical part of it. But for consenting adults without dependence, it can be fun and exciting. Story 12. Ethically, I do not care. Emotionally, I imagine that it's exhausting. Legally, it's a nightmare, especially in my state, which still has legitimation separate from paternity. Story 13. I mean, a lot of couples will gladly cheat on their partner before considering polyamory. Currently, I'm dating 2 other people outside my primary partner, and she has 1 other person, and we all have our own relationships, so it's not like we're all begging for attention from each other. It's casual but real, and all 5 of us hang out together from time to time. Story 14. Fine in theory, but rarely not a mess in practice. Populated with some of the worst people you can ever meet, and the scene does very little to acknowledge it. I have watched people spend a fortune on therapy to convince themselves they are okay with it. Also, straight men who want 2 girlfriends and claim they are part of the queer community make me want to commit crimes. My incredibly biased personal experience. I was polyamorous and swore off it because it is a difficult situation. Story 15. I know a few people it works for, but it's definitely not for me. However, it's not my place to have much opinion on what consenting adults choose to do together. Story 16. It is great as long as everybody is happy and consenting. While it is not for everybody, my husband and I have many partners we date and sleep with, both together and separately. Some are more casual relationships, some are serious, and we have had partners live with us. It works for us. Everybody enjoys the relationship, and we have full trust in each other. Story 17. I want to preface this by saying I literally do not care what adults do with their lives. But my personal opinion is it's usually one person who wants it and pushes for it. The other person goes along with it because they don't want to lose the other person, and then their relationship ultimately comes to an end. It seems in most situations it's their way of getting away with cheating. That, or they genuinely just don't love each other or like each other and want other people but are too comfortable to leave. Story 18. I've been married for almost 22 years now, and we've been some version of open or non-monogamous for most of that time. It works pretty well for us. You need to be a clear communicator and have a well-refined ethical code if you want it to work. If you're uncomfortable talking about what gets you hot and what makes you uncomfortable with your partners, then you're probably not the best fit with ethical non-monogamy. And you have to get extremely good at scheduling. Making plans and sticking to them is definitely an important part of polyamory. Story 19. I've never met a polyamorous person who wasn't just someone who was emotionally dysfunctional and needed compartmentalized relationships in order to create space between areas of obligation that challenged or intimidated them. Somehow, they managed to arrange several partial relationships in a way that looks like one whole relationship. Or, in the case that you're an orbiting moon or whatever they call it, one partial equals a whole. Anyways, they spend a lot of time making it sound great on paper. In real life, they seem very sad, very busy, and very disillusioned. Story 20. I am a happy polyamorous person. Relationships are healthy. The schedule is full, but that's to be expected. I'm always kind of amused when monogamous people say there's always drama. There's not. The happy polyamorous people just aren't talking to them, laughing out loud. I think that a lot of people want polyamory for themselves, but then aren't prepared for what that really means for their relationship and their partners. I have seen a number of polyamorous relationships fail when one person wants a rules for me but not for the kind of vibe. To be fair, I've seen similar situations in monogamous relationships as well. I don't think either relationship type is better or worse. Follow your heart and do what makes you happy. Story 21. Do whatever you like. It doesn't concern me. But I will say I tend to be wary of being friends with people who loudly represent their polyamorous lifestyle. Nothing against these people, but in my experience, they do not have good boundaries with their friends because they see everyone who is attractive as a potential partner. It doesn't matter if the person they are hitting on already has a partner, isn't interested, or isn't receptive to that kind of thing. They see flirting as a normal part of friendships. I don't. I've had to have several conversations with polyamorous friends that I do not want them to make comments about my body, hit on me, or make jokes about how they'd engage if I asked. Especially when my boyfriend is standing next to me, highly uncomfortable. I've had several polyamorous people do this and then tell me that I'm overreacting when I pull them aside and ask them to stop. They get really defensive and say that I'm hating on their lifestyle. I just tend to keep my distance now. Story 22. One thing I would love to share with this thread is that most non-monogamous people will view their relationships and friendships to be equally valuable. But of course, some hierarchy of time management comes into play. So in the same way monogamous people have time for friends and a relationship, non-monogamous people will have a level of romance or intimacy with multiple people. I think that is the biggest mindset shift from monogamous thinking to non-monogamous thinking. Polyamory and ethical non-monogamy don't simply mean multiple intense monogamous-style relationships. It can mean the freedom to allow any connection to grow into something that is special for the people involved. It might not even involve sex. Story 23. Not my thing, but as long as everyone in a polycule is going into it with full consent and without a power imbalance, such as a significant age difference between the partners, then it's none of my business. Story 24. I think you mean ethical non-monogamy. I am very pro-ethical non-monogamy, as I believe humans exist on a spectrum from very monogamous to very polyamorous. Story 25. It's always a disaster. It should not be normalized like this. 99% of them are toxic and end up being complete failures. Most people are not even emotionally mature for one partner. Adding more people into the mix is a recipe for disaster, and it looks exhausting as well. Story 26. 92% divorce rates. It just does not work long term. Also, I only want one and want one person to want me. Also, sexually transmitted diseases and possible pregnancy by another man make me never want to risk such an arrangement. Story 27. Not trying to mean any offense by this, but it's something I've only ever seen among the younger, lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer community. Seems like a thinly veiled version of swinging with extra steps. Story 28. I have tried it, and I have come to the conclusion that if you're with someone who wants to be in that type of lifestyle, then the relationship isn't going to last. As I told my girlfriend recently, as we were discussing a couple I know who are polyamorous, but only the wife is allowed to sleep around. I don't have many rules for the woman that I am with, but coming home with someone else's semen on or in you breaks a few of my limited rules. Story 29. Anything non-ethical means it's bad. As for ethical matters, anything consenting adults decide for their relationship is really up to them to decide and not for me or others to judge. Story 30. The way I see it, do what makes you happy, but get your own dating site. It's frustrating to like or match with someone only to find out they're not monogamous. Story 31. Curious, isn't it, how every time a couple goes polyamorous, it's almost invariably the man who pushed for it, and it's almost invariably the woman who gets hurt emotionally from the new arrangement. Story 32. Growing up, we had some family friends who were secretly polyamorous, though it was a secret only to us kids. Their daughter didn't even know until she was in graduate school. Her parents told her that all of these family friends were actually her mother's boyfriends and girlfriends, and she lost it. She moved from the East Coast to Hawaii, quit her job as a psychiatrist, married an unemployed beach bum, lives off her grandmother's trust, and excessively guilts her parents for space, isolation, and more money. This is what happens when you lie to your only child for over 18 years. In my opinion, polyamorous lifestyles are very hard to navigate with children involved. It seems to be high risk. Story 33. It is emotionally immature people who want to have their cake and eat it too, masquerading as some next level of non-jealousy and acceptance that normal people just cannot cope with, when in reality they are all just manipulating each other within their polyamorous relationships. Story 34. I have been in an ethically non-monogamous open relationship for 6 years of a 9-year relationship. This is great and only makes our relationship stronger. Story 35. I'm purely monogamous, so I have no interest in being in a non-monogamous relationship. But as long as all parties involved consent and respect each other, I don't have any problems with what others do. Story 36. If you can make it work in your relationship, then more power to you, and I'm happy for you. You must be having lots of fun. But my experience is that things go wrong when you invite another person into the bed you share with your partner. Story 37. If everything is consensual, I don't give a. I know both a throuple and a happy open marriage. I look for monogamy but hold no judgment towards what works for others. Story 38. If everyone involved consents, it's not really anybody else's business. But to me, it just sounds exhausting. It's hard enough to manage one relationship, let alone 4 or 5.